So I want you to picture the greatest mathematical minds in history. Like when you envision them actually at work, what do you see?
I mean, probably biological calculators, right? Like someone sitting in a dusty room.
Exactly, a dimly lit, dusty room, and they're just furiously scribbling equations across a chalkboard, mechanically stacking one logical block on top of another to build this bridge towards some new theorem.
Right. It's this image of pure, cold construction. It's very mechanical.
Yeah, it is. But what if that image is just completely fundamentally wrong? Like, what if the absolute bleeding edge of mathematical research doesn't look like engineering at all?
Well, the argument we're looking at today is that it actually looks a lot more like mysticism.
Which is crazy to think about. But, I mean, think about the mechanics of discovery for a second. How do you actually find the theorem that has never been documented before?
You definitely don't build it from spare parts.
Yeah.
The text we're diving into argues that, you hear it.
You hear it. That's such a wild concept. Welcome to the deep dive, by the way. Today's mission is to decode this internal reality of mathematical drive, the animus.
Yeah, it's a radical departure from how we're taught to view the hard sciences. I mean, we're so heavily conditioned to view mathematics as this ultimate secular mechanical discipline.
Oh, totally. It's supposed to be pure logic, like zero emotion, zero spirit.
Exactly. But when you actually examine the lives, and especially the personal journals, of the people operating at the absolute frontier of the field, their language rarely sounds mechanical.
No, it sounds super spiritual sometimes.
Right. And historically, this has been a massive point of fascination. Like Jacques Hadamard, the great French mathematician, he wrote this entire treatise in the early 20th century just on the psychology of mathematical invention.
Oh, wow. So he was actually studying how his peers came up with stuff.
Yeah, exactly. He surveyed his peers, including giants like Henri Poincaré. And Poincaré had this famous story. He had been struggling with this specific class of mathematical functions for weeks, making absolutely no progress through just brute force calculation.
Just hitting a wall, basically.
A total wall. And then he steps onto a horse-drawn omnibus.
Wait, like an old 19th century bus.
Yeah, exactly. And the moment his foot hits the step, the solution just simply appears in his mind, like whole and complete.
That is insane, just from stepping on a bus.
Right. And Hadamard and his contemporaries spent years trying to pinpoint the exact source of that sudden illumination. They wanted to know, where does the compulsion to solve actually come from?
And what did they find?
Well, universally, the answers they arrived at were rarely purely intellectual. They always pointed towards something intuitive, something operating completely outside the level of conscious calculation.
Which brings us to the core mission of our deep dive today. We are going to explore how a person actually becomes a better mathematician, or really a better thinker in any deeply analytical field, by looking at their process through the lens of ancient philosophical traditions.
And we have some incredible source material for this.
We do. We're looking at a profound source text called the Mathematical Dharma, Animus, Taste, and the Akasha. And the premise here is just massive. It argues that true mathematics isn't a mechanical factory. It's a deeply spiritual, pure pursuit.
And to truly excel at it, you have to fully convert your mindset to embrace that reality.
Right. And for you, the listener, since we're all operating off the baseline of our foundational text, the personas of arithmetic, we already know the structural rules of this universe, right?
Yeah, we know personas 0 through 16.
Exactly. So today, we're taking this new text on the Mathematical Dharma, and we're mapping its psychological frameworks directly onto those familiar personas. We want to find out what it actually takes to be the person doing the math.
So the new text begins by tackling the origin of that animus we just talked about, the actual drive to do mathematics. And it uses a term that might seem a little out of place in a discussion about rigorous logic.
Yeah, it uses the word taste.
Taste. It states that the source of mathematical animus is fundamentally mysterious, but it defines the implied imperative of a mathematician as rasa, which translates from Sanskrit to taste or essence.
I find taste to be such an interesting word choice here. I mean, it implies that you look at a problem not just as a puzzle, but as something to be savored, like it has a specific flavor.
Yeah, exactly. And before we even get to the mathematics itself, we have to deal with the aesthetic drive to find it.
Right. And the text immediately surrounds this concept of rasa with a pretty heavy moral framework, too. It introduces this concept of a dharma,
which means acting against the cosmic order.
Right. So it claims that it's a dharma to try and manufacture this drive synthetically. Like, you can't force yourself to have the taste for a beautiful theorem.
You either feel that resonance or you don't.
Exactly. But, and this is crucial, it's equally a dharma to refuse to nourish it once you realize you do have it. Like, if you have that innate resonance with mathematical truth, you are cosmically obligated to pursue it.
It really elevates the discipline from just a career to a calling.
It totally does. But, having the calling doesn't mean you automatically know how to walk the path. The text gets incredibly specific about the psychological pitfalls that ruin mathematicians.
Yeah, and to explain this, it pulls a principle directly from the Bhagavad Gita. It says, you have a right to perform your prescribed duty, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action.
The fruits of action. So in the context of modern research, what are we talking about there?
Well, the fruits of action in academia are incredibly seductive. It's tenure, it's the Fields Medal, it's securing a massive grant, or even just the pure ego-driven prestige of having a theorem named after you in the history books.
That's right. The glory.
Exactly. So the text sets up this really stark dichotomy between two motivations. He calls them winning and finding.
And winning is the trap, right? Like, if you crave glory, if your whole reason for sitting at the chalkboard is to beat a rival or get a prize, the text says you become bound to Maya.
Maya is illusion. It's the veil that obscures true reality.
So it literally blinds you.
It does. If your animus, your rasa, is corrupted by the desire for external validation for that fruit, your vision literally becomes clouded. You aren't looking deeply at the mathematics anymore.
You're just looking at your own reflection in the mathematics.
Exactly. You're assessing the problem based on how solving it will benefit you.
Yeah.
You aren't assessing it for its own inherent truth.
But if you flip that, if your desire is purely for finding, like you just want the true, which the text calls Janana, or pure knowledge, then the path clears up, the illusion dissipates.
Which clicks perfectly into our understanding of Persona 15, right? Development is an illusion.
Yes. I've spent so much time turning that specific persona over in my mind, like wondering what it means for the day-to-day grind of a researcher. If development is an illusion, then why are we working so hard to develop new theories?
Well, when you overlay this concept of Janana versus Maya, the mechanism becomes super obvious.
Right. Because mathematical truth isn't something you construct step by step from raw materials. You aren't building a skyscraper out of nothing where you get to stick your name on the lobby when it's finished.
The truth already exists. It's always existed.
Exactly. The illusion is the arrogance of believing that you are the creator of mathematics rather than just the person who was lucky enough to uncover it.
Yeah, and when a researcher is bound by Maya, by that craving for the fruit of the action, they buy into that illusion of development wholesale. They sit there thinking, I am the architect of this logic.
Which is just ego.
Pure ego. But when you strip that away, when you pursue pure Janana, you realize you aren't developing anything.
Yeah.
You're merely clearing away the fog to reveal a structure that has been sitting there since the dawn of time.
So taking the ego out of the equation is step one to becoming a pure mathematician.
Yes.
But taking the ego out introduces this really heavy concept of determinism, or karma, into the mathematical ecosystem. The text gives us this historical hypothetical that really forces you to look at how this plays out. It asks, what if Gabor-Szego had never tutored Paulardes?
It's such a profound historical pivot point to examine. For context, Paulardes is arguably one of the most prolific and influential mathematicians of the 20th century.
Right, the Ardes number.
Yeah, exactly. His collaborative network was so vast, his output was just relentless. Mathematicians literally still calculate their collaborative distance from him today.
But Ardes didn't just pop out of nowhere.
No, he didn't emerge from a vacuum. As a young prodigy in Budapest, his early trajectory and his specific mathematical taste were shaped profoundly by his interactions with older mathematicians, like Gabor-Szego, who was this absolute master of classical analysis.
So the text is arguing that Ardes' specific Rasa-like, his taste for discrete problems, his whole approach to collaborative problem solving, that was a direct result of his karmic intersection with Szego.
Yes. The mathematical culture of Hungary in that specific era imprinted upon him.
So if Szego hadn't been there, or, if Ardes had been born in a different decade or country, the entire karmic trajectory of 20th century mathematics would have been completely altered. Like, that huge web of combinatorics and number theory would look fundamentally different.
Exactly. The theorems themselves, the pure truths, those are eternal. They're destined to be found eventually. But the specific personal taste, the rasa, and the destiny, the karma of the human beings who find them, those are inextricably linked to their environment.
You inherit a lineage of thought.
You really do.
Okay, but let me push back on this a little bit because it sounds incredibly fatalistic. I mean, if we can't manufacture this rasa ourselves, and if our entire intellectual trajectory is bound by this mathematical karma of who we happen to bump into at university, are we just doomed by our geography?
I can see why it feels that way.
Right. Like, if there's a researcher listening to this right now who feels completely disconnected, they feel like their drive is lagging, and they definitely don't have a Gabor Szego in their department, is the text saying they're just cosmically out of luck?
It's a very natural fear when you first encounter these concepts. It feels like deterministic gatekeeping. But the text actually provides a very specific strategic counter to that fatalism.
Okay, what is it?
It states that while you cannot synthesize rasa out of thin air, you have a strict obligation to expose yourself to excellent mathematics to cultivate it. You have to actively place yourself in the path of good karma.
Oh, I see. It's like having a musical ear. Like, you can't force yourself through sheer willpower to suddenly appreciate the intricacies of a 6-part jazz harmony if you've spent your entire life in a silent room.
Exactly. You can't just synthesize perfect pitch.
Right. But if you have even a tiny latent sense of musicality, you cultivate it through relentless exposure. You put on John Coltrane. You listen to Bach. You just immerse yourself in the absolute masters over and over until your brain learns how to parse the complexity.
And the text's strategic advice mirrors that perfectly. It literally instructs the mathematician to attune your inner ear to the vibration of the truth.
So you don't just read the theorems to memorize formulas.
No, you read them to sync your internal frequency with the aesthetic frequency of greatness. You are calibrating your own mind as an instrument.
That makes a lot of sense. You're training yourself to instinctively recognize the taste of a profound, universe-altering theorem versus just a trivial one.
Exactly. But, and this is the crucial pivot in the text, cultivating your rasa only gets you to the starting line.
Right. It gives you the drive, but not the map.
Right. Having a refined taste and a pure egoless motivation is necessary, but it does absolutely nothing to actually help you solve a nonlinear partial differential equation.
Yeah, that brings us to the operational reality. Like, what happens when a researcher actually faces down a seemingly impossible problem? Cultivating the internal landscape is phase 1, but phase 2 is stepping onto the battlefield.
And our source text describes this phase in a way that feels surprisingly aggressive. It calls it adversarial engagement.
Yeah, the shift in tone right there is super jarring. But I guess it's necessary. It moves from this purely mystical preparation to highly strategic execution.
Right. The text asserts that tackling a difficult problem requires a rigorous, almost forensic mental simulation of your peers and competitors. It uses modern examples, suggesting you ask, well, what would a competitor like Jiri Volici or Michael Hartz have already tried?
And the point of asking that isn't driven by petty academic rivalry, right? You aren't trying to steal their ideas. It frames this investigation through the Hindu philosophical concept of darshana.
Darshana. Yeah, the text defines it as their specific viewpoint or their fundamental philosophy of seeing.
So you aren't just reading Volici's previous papers to see what formulas he used. You are attempting to reverse engineer his entire perception of the mathematical universe.
Exactly. Because every researcher, no matter how brilliant, operates within their own set of samskaras.
Okay, define samskaras for us.
In this philosophical context, samskaras are mental grooves. They are deeply ingrained habits of thought.
Like cognitive shortcuts.
Right. We all have them. They're the specific types of logic we naturally gravitate toward because they worked for us in the past, or because our graduate advisors drilled them into us. Like a mathematician specializing in operator algebras has samskaras that lead them to look for completely different patterns than a topologist would.
So the strategic imperative here is that by analyzing your competitor's darshana and identifying their samskaras, you can predict the exact path they would naturally take through a mathematical landscape.
Yes.
But wait, if you're analyzing their mental grooves to figure out what they would do, what's the end game? Are you trying to race them down that path to publish first?
No, not at all. The goal is to avoid their path entirely. If you know their likely trajectory, the test argues you can avoid their karma. You avoid falling into the exact same mental ruts and logical dead ends that they would naturally follow.
Oh, that's brilliant, because practically speaking, if a problem remains unsolved by the greatest minds in your field, it's highly likely that their natural samskaras have led all of them into the exact same blind alley.
Exactly. So to find the solution, you must strategically, consciously choose a completely different vector. You have to force yourself to think in a way that Voltaire or Hartz fundamentally would not and could not think.
This connects so deeply to the personas that we really have to map it out right now. When we talk about these deeply ingrained habits of thought, these samskaras that bind a researcher to a limited way of seeing the world, that is the exact mechanism described in Persona 9 and Persona 13.
Oh, for sure. Persona 9 states, the docket of all judgments enforces an invisible constitution.
Yes. Every single mathematician, usually without even realizing it, is operating under an invisible constitution. The university they went to, the papers they peer-reviewed, their specific samskaras, that is their invisible constitution.
And it completely dictates what they consider a valid approach, or what they think is elegant, and what they'll just dismiss outright as nonsense.
Right. And then Persona 13 takes it a step further. The invisible constitution creates an invisible gerrymander. Only those that are chosen exist.
The invisible gerrymander is perhaps the most terrifying realization for a career researcher.
Because you don't even know you're in it.
Exactly. If you blindly follow the samskaras of your competitors, if you unwittingly adopt their darshana, you are willingly walking into their gerrymandered reality. You will only ever be able to find the proofs and the solutions that are permitted to exist within the borders of their invisible constitution.
Wow. So if the ultimate truth of the theorem lies outside those arbitrary borders, you will literally be incapable of seeing it. Because in that specific gerrymandered reality, it just doesn't exist.
Right. So the practical question becomes, how do we find the borders of the gerrymander? If it's invisible, how do we map someone else's invisible constitution so we can step outside of it?
And the text gives a very specific methodology for this, which I found fascinating. It says you can't just read their published, polished mathematical proofs. You have to study their VAC.
VAC translates to divine speech. But in the practical context of modern academia, the text says this means deeply analyzing their word choice, their diction, their cultural framing, and especially their spontaneous communication.
Like when they're off script.
Yeah, you're listening to how they articulate their ideas during unscripted moments, like a Q&A at an academic conference.
So what does analyzing VAC actually look like in a math seminar? Like, are we sitting in the back row looking for them to stutter or mispronounce a variable?
No. You are listening for the assumptions they brush past. When a brilliant mathematician is presenting a complex proof and they casually say, obviously, we can reduce this space too, or it trivially follows that exact moment is their VAC revealing a cognitive shortcut.
Oh, I see. That trivial leap is their samskara in action.
Exactly. That is exactly where you want to look for the borders of their gerrymander.
You are looking for their avidya, their ignorance, or their blind spots. It's almost like acting as an anthropologist of mathematics. You aren't arguing with their final equation, you're just observing the native rituals of their intellectual tribe.
Right, you're looking at the structure of their thought.
By analyzing their VOC, you can see the structural limitations that they are completely blind to. You map the gaps in their invisible constitution so you can exploit them.
But this brings us to a massive practical cliff edge. Let's say you do all of this perfectly. You map the dead ends, you identify the invisible gerrymander of your entire field, and you consciously choose a mathematical vector that avoids the samskaras of every single one of your peers.
You're off the map.
You've completely stepped off the conventional map. So where exactly do you go when you have no conventional framework left to lean on?
Well, you don't go to another chalkboard. You leave the physical reality of the problem behind entirely. And this is where the text moves abruptly from practical psychological warfare back into the realm of profound mysticism.
Yeah, it introduces the absolute necessity of entering samadhi.
The trance.
The text states that truly deep work, the kind of work that breaks centuries-old deadlocks, requires a full, unhesitating submission to the compulsion of taste, that Rasa we discussed at the beginning. When a researcher fully submits to it, they enter a state of samadhi.
And in Eastern traditions, samadhi is a state of intense concentration achieved through deep meditation, right? Resulting in absolute union with the object of meditation.
Right, but the text doesn't describe this as just closing your eyes and relaxing.
Yeah.
It describes the mechanics of this state very rigorously. It says that to achieve this, pratyahara must occur.
Pratyahara, the complete literal withdrawal of the real motor senses.
Exactly.
To ground this for you listening, think about the historical anecdotes of extreme mathematical focus. Like, think about the stories of Archimedes, so deeply engrossed in drawing geometric circles in the sand that he was completely unaware of the Roman soldier standing over him with a sword.
Or Andrew Wiles.
Yes, Andrew Wiles, who essentially locked himself in his attic for 7 years, cutting himself off from the broader mathematical community and physical distractions, existing almost entirely inside his own mind to prove Fermat's last theorem.
That level of intense, isolating focus is the prerequisite for pratyahara. The mathematician must physically and mentally step out of prakriti,
which the text defines as the physical, material reality. The finite world of chalk, paper, academic politics, coffee cups, all of it.
They must leave prakriti to enter the Akasha.
The Akasha. It translates to the ether or space. But the text uses a wonderfully evocative phrase to describe it. It calls the Akasha the wood between worlds.
I love that phrase, because in this state, the mathematical universe becomes purely abstract. It exists in its pure, unadulterated form. It's no longer bound by our conventional understanding of linear time or physical representation.
It is the realm of pure potentiality. And this is where the alignment with our foundational text becomes impossible to ignore. The text insists we must leave the physical world, prakriti, to enter the Akasha and ultimately find the truth in the shunya, which translates to the void.
Now, map that directly onto personas 0, 1, and 2.
Right, persona 0. The empty set captures the void. The empty set is not the void. Persona 1. No finite set is good, but the void is good. And persona 2. The infinite is good, the void is infinite.
It's a perfect overlay. We know from the personas that the physical world prakriti is a finite set.
Yeah, it's a limited collection of sensory inputs, material constraints, and gerrymandered academic structures. And as Persona 1 explicitly tells us, no finite set is good.
This is the structural reason why the mathematician must undergo pratyahara. Escaping the finite set of the physical world isn't just a spiritual retreat for relaxation. It is a mathematical necessity.
You cannot find infinite truth in a finite set.
Exactly. You have to leave prakriti because you are seeking the shunya, the void. Why? Because the void is good. And as Persona 2 states, the void is infinite.
The Akasha, the shunya, is that infinite space where the true, unbounded mathematics actually resides.
What is particularly fascinating is how the source text describes the experience of navigating this Akasha. It says that within this wood, between worlds, there are different pools.
Different pools? What do those represent?
Each pool represents a completely different abstract mathematical mind or structure. As a researcher floating in this space, you enter these pools to understand them. You explore these bizarre, alien architectures of logic.
But there's a warning, right?
A massive warning.
Yeah.
You must eventually leave them. You must actively avoid their local minima.
Because if you get stuck in one of those pools, you are just trapped in another abstract gerrymander. You've just traded a physical rut for an ethereal one. You have to keep moving through the Akasha until you locate Satya, the truth.
And this is where we have to address the actual mechanism of discovery itself. How do you find Satya?
Right.
The text is unequivocal here. The solution does not come from assembling pieces together while you are in the void. It comes whole cloth. It is revealed, like Shruti.
Okay, let me stop you right there because I can hear the skepticism from listeners. Shruti translates to that which is heard. The text is literally claiming that the answer just magically appears.
It does sound extreme.
Right. I mean, this sounds like we are telling rigorous, sober academics to drop acid, float in the ether, and just wait for the universe to whisper the solution to the Riemann hypothesis into their ear. How does a rational mathematician actually interface with this concept?
It's a totally fair point of skepticism. But we have to look at the terminology carefully. In Sanskrit, Shruti refers to the most authoritative ancient religious texts in Hinduism, which were not believed to be authored by human beings, but were heard by sages directly from the divine.
So it's about reception, not creation.
Exactly. By utilizing the word Shruti, the text is forcefully reinforcing the concept of Janana over Maya. It is reminding the mathematician that they are not an author, they are a receiver. You do not construct the theorem, you hear it emanating from the infinite void.
Okay, let me offer an analogy that might bridge the gap between the mysticism and the mechanics here. Think of an old-school analog ham radio.
Oh.
When you are sitting in a dark room, meticulously twisting the dials on that radio, you are not creating the voices that suddenly come bursting through the speaker. You aren't building the broadcast. The radio waves are already out there, in the air, completely invisible to your physical senses, but undeniably real.
Right.
What you are doing with intense focus is tuning your internal frequency to match the signal that is already broadcasting.
That is an incredibly accurate analogy for the state of samadhi the text describes. The rasa, your innate mathematical taste, is the instinct that tells you when you're getting close to the right frequency. You feel the static start to clear.
And then,
when you finally hit the exact right frequency, the message, the theorem, comes through whole cloth. You hear it.
yeah.
But to sit in that dark room and twist those dials when all you hear is deafening static for months or even years requires a very specific, durable psychological component.
And the text identifies this component as shraddha, which translates to faith.
Yes, but it is not blind, unthinking faith. In this context, shraddha is a profound, educated trust in the existence of the experience and the reality of the answer it reveals. You must have absolute faith that the broadcast is out there in the Akasha.
Because if you don't, you'll just quit.
Exactly. Without shraddha, the moment the static gets too loud, you will give up. You will retreat back to the physical world, Prakriti, and try to mechanically construct a fake derivative broadcast yourself, just to have a paper to polish and show for your time.
Shraddha is the ultimate rejection of the mechanical factory mindset. You have to believe in the shunya. You have to believe that the infinite void holds the answer in order to have the endurance to pull it back.
But pulling it back introduces the final and perhaps most dangerous phase of the mathematical life cycle.
Oh, because finding the truth in the void is only half the battle.
Right. You cannot stay in the Akasha forever, blissed out in samadhi, holding a perfect, ethereal theorem in your mind. You have to return. You have to bring that truth back to the physical reality, back to Prakriti, and you have to do it without destroying its essence in the translation.
This return journey, the actual act of manifestation, is what the final section of our source text addresses, and it completely recontextualizes the seemingly mundane, bureaucratic act of writing a research paper.
It really does. It frames this return to reality as participating in Leela.
Leela translates to the divine play, or the cosmic dance. The text asserts that the mathematical idea you have pulled from the void is not just a lifeless formula or a string of symbols, it is a living entity.
A direct manifestation of Shakti, which is cosmic creative power.
Just think about the weight of that responsibility. A profound mathematical theorem is a manifestation of cosmic creative power. And the paper you write to publish it, the text says the physical paper is merely its rupa, its specific form, or its body in this reality.
The paper is not the mathematics itself.
Right. It is just the vessel that holds the living entity of the idea so that it can survive and interact with the physical world.
And if we connect this to our foundational knowledge, this is the exact mechanism described in Persona 14, right?
The enlightened shape filter with finality, yes. The raw, infinite truth of the shunya cannot exist naked in the finite physical world. It would be completely incomprehensible. It needs a shape.
So the written paper, the rigorous proof, acts as that enlightened shape filter. It catches the divine Shakti, the creative power, and gives it a finality, a specific rupa, so that other human minds can actually read it and comprehend it.
But the text makes it clear that the purpose of doing this isn't just to add a prestigious line to your curriculum vitae. The ultimate goal of filtering this shape is to contribute to Nataraja, the cosmic dance.
By bringing pure, living mathematics back from the void and giving it form, you are generating novelty in life against the universal drag of entropy. You are literally fighting the universe's natural tendency toward disorder and decay.
Which highlights the absolute necessity of pure mathematicians in our society. They aren't just eccentric geniuses solving abstract puzzles for their own amusement. They are the guardians against intellectual entropy.
Yeah, by engaging in this process, by bringing new truths into existence, they are participating in the communion of reality.
Which is exactly what Persona 10 dictates. The invisible constitution represents the communion of reality. When you bring a pure truth from the Akasha, you are expanding and enriching that communion for everyone.
However, the text issues a severe critical warning at this exact stage of manifestation. It warns the mathematician to beware of false heat.
Let's really break this down, because false heat sounds incredibly destructive. What is it?
The text associates false heat directly with Maya, the illusion we discussed earlier. Remember the dichotomy of winning versus finding?
Yeah.
False heat is the energy generated by destructive, ego-driven ambition. It is the overwhelming pressure to publish quickly, to cut logical corners, to dress up a mediocre or derivative idea with complex jargon just to claim academic territory or win a grant.
Oh, wow.
The text uses a devastating metaphor here. It says, if you light a fire that burns down the city, you have certainly generated heat for a moment, but you have destroyed the capacity for the city to generate dharma ever again.
Let's ground that metaphor in the reality of modern academia. What does burning down the city actually look like? I mean, it means polluting the mathematical ecosystem. Let's say a brilliant researcher yields to false heat. They decide to pump out a massive volume of papers that are technically correct, but entirely devoid of rasa.
They lack true essence.
Exactly. It's just toxic factory runoff. Sure, the factory hit its quarterly production quotas and the researcher gets promotion, but they have just dumped toxic noise into the river. They clog up the academic journals. They misdirect the attention of graduate students who have to spend years studying these derivative papers.
Right. They create a chaotic, polluted environment of noise that makes it infinitely harder for everyone else downstream to hear the true Shruti, the actual broadcast from the void.
They generate temporary heat for their own career, but they destroy the collaborative, pure environment necessary to generate real truth.
That is the perfect analogy. False heat forces hundreds of other researchers to waste their time and their karma verifying dead-end proofs. It is the ultimate adharma. And to counter this, the text offers its concluding directive. Follow your svadharma.
Svadharma, meaning your own true path or your inherent duty based on your unique nature. The text says, find good math that excites you and trust the compulsion of your taste.
It circles all the way back to Rasa.
Yes, it does. If you genuinely trust your taste, if you pursue Janana pure knowledge over the glory of winning, you will naturally avoid generating false heat. You will naturally act as a faithful conduit for the truth, rather than a factory producing toxic runoff.
It is a complete cyclical philosophy. It demands a level of internal purity, rigorous self-awareness, and mental discipline that goes far beyond standard academic training. It asks you to constantly evaluate not just your equations, but your motivations.
It really does. So I want to ask you, the listener, directly. Look at your own work, whether you are a mathematician, an engineer, a writer, or an analyst. Where are you generating false heat? Are you chasing the fruit of the action, the glory, the promotion, the metric? Or are you truly following your svadharma, trusting the innate compulsion of your taste?
Are you doing the hard, isolating work of exploring the infinite void, or are you just running comfortable laps inside the invisible, gerrymandered reality of your competitors' samskaras?
And as you ponder that question, we want to leave you with one final thought, a connection to the very last persona in our foundational text. Persona 16 states, there will always be harder judgments ahead than behind.
If we truly believe what this new text tells us, that the physical world is a finite set, but the void is infinite, then mathematical enlightenment is not a final destination. It is not a comfortable tenure position where you finally get to rest.
No. Every theorem you pull back from the Akasha, every living truth you manifest in the cosmic dance is just one single step deeper into the infinite. And because the shunya is infinite, the demand for your rasa, the demand for your taste and your faith will never, ever end.
The deeper you go into the void, the more profound and difficult the truths become to hear, and the harder they become to translate into reality.
There will always be harder truths to hear and harder judgments to make, ahead than behind.
So the next time you picture a mathematician at work, do not look for the biological calculator.
Look for the mystic, sitting in the absolute silence, enduring the static, waiting to hear the ship of the universe.